President of the Philippines first term, second term martial law, third term Ferdinand Emmanuel. Ferdinand Marcos Sr. was a Filipino politician, lawyer, and kleptocrat who served as the 10th President of the Philippines from 1965 to 1986. Espousing an ideology of constitutional authoritarianism. 414 under the New Society movement. He ruled as a dictator under martial law from 1972 until 1981. And kept most of his martial law powers until he was deposed in 1986. One of the most controversial leaders of the 20th century, Marcos' rule was infamous for its corruption, extravagance, and brutality. Throughout his political career, Marcos claimed to have been the most decorated war hero in the Philippines. A number of his claims have been found to be false, with United States Army documents describing his wartime claims as fraudulent and absurd. After World War II, he became a lawyer, then served in the Philippine House of Representatives from 1949 to 1959 and the Philippine Senate. From 1959 to 1965, he was elected the President of the Philippines in 1965, and presided over an economy that grew during the beginning of his 20-year rule, but would end in the loss of livelihood, extreme poverty, and a crushing debt crisis. He pursued an aggressive program of infrastructure development funded by foreign debt, making him popular during his first term, although it would also trigger an inflationary crisis which would lead to social unrest in his second term. Marcos placed the Philippines under martial law on September 23, 1972, shortly before the end of his second term. Martial law was ratified in 1973 through a fraudulent referendum. The constitution was revised, media outlets were silenced, and violence and oppression were used against the political opposition, Muslims, suspected communists, and ordinary citizens. After being elected for a third term in the 1981 Philippine presidential election, Marcos's popularity suffered greatly due to the economic collapse which began in early 1983, and the public outrage over the assassination of opposition leader, Senator Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr. Later that year, this discontent, the resulting resurgence of the opposition in the 1984 Philippine parliamentary election, and the discovery of documents exposing his financial accounts and false war records, led Marcos to call the snap election of 1986. Allegations of mass cheating, political turmoil, and human rights abuses led to the People Power Revolution of February 1986, which removed him from power. To avoid what could have been a military confrontation in Manila between pro- and anti-Marcos troops, Marcos was advised by U.S. President Ronald Reagan through Senator Paul Luxalt to cut and cut cleanly. Marcos then fled with his family to Hawaii. He was succeeded as president by Aquino's widow, Corazon Cory Aquino. According to source documents provided by the Presidential Commission on Good Government, the Marcos family stole $5 billion United States dollars, $10 billion from the Central Bank of the Philippines. The PCGG also maintained that the Marcos family enjoyed a decadent lifestyle, taking away billions of dollars from the Philippines between 1965 and 1986. His wife Imelda Marcos, made infamous in her own right by the excesses that characterized her and her husband's conjugal dictatorship, is the source of the term Imeldific. Two of their children, Aimee Marcos and Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., are still active in Philippine politics. He and his wife currently hold the Guinness World Record for greatest robbery of a government. Ferdinand Emmanuel Ferdinand Marcos was born on September 11, 1917, in the town of Surat, Ilocos Norte to Mariano Marcos and Josefa Ferdinand. Mariano Marcos was a lawyer and congressman from Ilocos Norte, Philippines. He was executed by Filipino guerrillas in 1945 for being a Japanese propagandist and collaborator. During World War II, drawn and quartered with the use of carabaos, his remains were left hanging on a tree. Josefa Marcos was a schoolteacher who would far outlive her husband, dying in 1988, 2 years after the Marcos family left her in Malacanang Palace when they fled into exile after the 1986 People Power Revolution. Ferdinand was first baptized into the Philippine Independent Church, but was later baptized into the Catholic Church at the age of 3. Marcos studied law at the University of the Philippines in Manila. Attending the College of Law, he excelled in both curricular and extracurricular activities. Becoming a member of the university's swimming, boxing, and wrestling teams, he was also an accomplished orator, debater, and writer for the student newspaper. While attending the UP College of Law, he became a member of the Upsilon Sigma Phi, where he met his future colleagues in government and some of his staunchest critics. When he sat for the 1939 bar examinations, he was a bar top-notcher with a score of 92.35%. He graduated cum laude. He was elected to the Pi Gamma Mu and the Phi Cap.